Hey everyone, welcome to West Coast Muscle Saws. Just doing a little maintenance on my skill saw here. This is a vintage Pioneer Partner. Partner originally made this saw, and then of course Skill wanted to sell some chainsaws, so they got into it and had it branded. You can see how clean it is. At the bottom, everything's really nice. Look at the bar and chain here. It's all original, all brand new. Just in perfect shape. But that's not what I want to talk about today. I got a couple other things I want to go over with you. I had some questions on the Husqvarna 2100 CDs, XPs, very popular saw. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, that was the West Coast chainsaw. And there was lots of things that we did back then, and now I'll explain it to you. I had a question about the 2100 factory high performance pistons. And what it was, the cylinder they would make, and of course if they made them a little too large, I mean we're talking just minute, they would make a different piston. And they would match them up at Sweden factory is what they would do. And so they would have an A, B, and a C piston, depending on which cylinder that you had there. And so what they wanted us to do, I was at the training for this, and what they wanted us to do is to break that, if we were going to rebuild it, break that cylinder down, take it down, and look at the piston. It was an A, B, or C. You put an A, B, or C in it. And of course we quickly learned that if you had an A cylinder, or an A piston in that cylinder, it was a smaller bore, just minute. So you would take a B piston and put into that, and you could actually up the compression just by doing that alone. We would up the compression probably 25, 35, 40 pounds PSI, and then we would even put a C in there, but you had to be real careful, mic it and everything, and if you could get it to break in, you would have a very, very high compression engine. Tie that in with doing some modifications, and you had a very high performance 6-cube saw that the guys would run a 50-inch bar on it. And it's very common to do that, and the guys got onto it. And here's the information. Of course, I had to go back into the archives to find this. But if you ever get a 2100 in your shop, or if you're collecting the 2100s and you're curious about it, if it's an OEM piston and cylinder, you'll be able to look at it. Now the only difference here is if it's a later model, I mean if it's towards the end of production, they eliminated the A, B, and the C, and they just went with one piston. But anyway, there's the part numbers right there for your A, B, and C. Hopefully that come out right. And of course you used the same rings. You didn't have to exchange the rings. It was just the tight tolerances on that piston, and it just made that saw. I mean, these things you could barely pull them over. There was no decompression valve on a 2100, and so right off the get-go they were high compression, and then you do the modification to that and do some port work, and I'm telling you, those saws were unbelievable. But the 2100s were very popular. I sold hundreds of them, if not more, and did a lot of work on them, and there's all kinds of modifications you can do to them. The dual, you've seen the exhaust, what they look like. I don't have a picture of the exhaust, but you could actually put another bonnet. We call those the bonnets on the exhaust, if you're holding the saw on the right side. The bonnet with the screen on it, of course we took the screen out, which you don't do that anymore, you understand that. And we would braze a bonnet on the left side and open that up 3/4 of an inch and really open that saw up. And then you could also deck the cylinder. Decking is basically you get a machinist to perform the work. You got to get a machinist to do it. It's really hard for backyard guys to do it. Let me see if I can find my some stuff here that I had custom made. Hang on. Be right back, guys. I found it. Here's my collection when I was doing the modifications. I had these mandrel all made up, and you would chuck that in your lathe, and then this would slide into the cylinder, and then your deadhead would come up against the cylinder, and then you were able to shave that, you know, usually the thickness of the gasket. The gaskets were 15, sometimes 15,000. You'd measure each one, and then that's what you would shave off. And a lot of guys would just eliminate the gasket, slide the cylinder on, but you got an issue with the crankcase pressure vacuum portal going to run your fuel pump in your carburetor. If you didn't get it right, you'd get an air leak there, and I don't know how many of those I've seen when the guys would just take the gasket out, and they would run good for a while, and then all of a sudden they start getting an air leak or wouldn't get the proper fuel going to their engine, and they would burn the saw. So we did this, and it's pretty common. The guys, that's how they do that. I've got a box of them here. I did all kinds of them, different saws, different ones. And that's something, if you're going to get into doing this work, that's what you need. You really need these to be able to do the custom work. And then, of course, you can. We used to also bore out the venturi on the carburetors. Did that. Did all kinds of things like that, and you can really make one of those saws perform. It's a lot of fun to do. It does shorten the life. A lot of guys don't realize that. It will shorten the life of your engine. Not necessarily. It depends on the operator with the trigger finger. A lot of guys just want to hear these things run. You know, these things would tack out super way over what they should. And you could burn one up. I've had guys burn them up in an hour, or I've had guys run the saw that I built for 2-3 years. It just depends on the operator. You don't want to just freewheel with a high performance engine, car, 2-cycle, 4-cycle. You just don't want to do that, but guys like to do that. Then we would also, the oilers, you can change the pitch of the gear. I don't have a gear in front of me, but we'll pretend this is the gear. You know, it's got a little slope, and that's what makes it articulate. We would take those and we would mill them just a little more. Guys out here want a lot of oil. Not only did the 2100 have an automatic pump, it also had a manual pump. And guys out here would want the most oil they could get on that because they're dealing with these Doug fir trees, which have very high pitch content. And so they want to keep that lubricated good because they want their bars to hold up. And we've talked before about which oil should you use. If you're timber cutting, actually cutting big wood, and it's the Doug fir kind, the soft wood that does produce pitch. I've had guys do everything. I've had guys use the used crankcase oil. And we talked about this before, their philosophy is, well, yeah, I might go through a bar, but I'm saving hundreds of dollars by running this used oil. And I've worked on their saws, other than being super messy and stuff and some extra wear on the bar and the chain. You can do it. I don't recommend it. We use the winter oil, summer oil. There's a tackier oil for the summer, and then not so tacky in the winter to make the oiler work right. Of course, you need to warm up the chainsaw. You really should get the oil reservoir, let it idle there. You're not running the oiler out if it's an automatic oiler. The oiler doesn't work until you engage the clutch. That's what drives the gear. And so you can sit there and warm the saw up for about 4 or 5 minutes. Get everything warmed up, and then you can get that oil where it will flow better and use that. But, your call on that. I mean, I've seen it both ways. A lot cleaner for the technicians working on your saws if they don't use the used oil. But that's strictly up to you. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here, guys. I just wanted to bring that up. I had some questions on it. I think it's some good information. You might let me know if you run into one with your piston A, B, or C. Of course, C being the most desired piston for the high performance guys. But just look at it. Just gently clean off with some carburetor cleaner. Clean off the top of that piston. See if you got an A, B, or C. If you got an old vintage 80s chainsaw, you're going to have one of the three. All right, guys. Let me get out of here, and we'll be talking to you later.